2 million years ago, being human was not cool. There were no cities, no firelight, no weapons worth bragging about, no safe shelters, no medicine, no second chances. If you were born as one of the earliest humans, there is a very real possibility that you would never even make it to your teenage years. In fact, one study suggests that for Homo habilis, average lifespan may have been around 12 years old, and possibly even lower. Not because they were weak-minded, not because they were lazy, but because the world they were born into was so brutally unfair that almost everything around them seemed perfectly designed to kill them. And the worst part is that they weren't even losing a fair fight. These were small, lightly built humans trying to survive in ancient Africa while surrounded by saber-toothed cats, giant hyenas, crocodiles literally named human eater, territorial herbivores, deadly snakes, unstable climate, and even other humans that may have been smarter, larger, and better equipped. So today, we're going back to one of the worst spawn points in human history to answer a very simple question. Why did early humans have absolutely no chance? And trust me, the deeper we go, the more ridiculous this gets. When people imagine early humans, they often picture rugged cavemen built like warriors. That is not what we are dealing with here. Homo habilis was one of the earliest members of our genus, living roughly between 2.3 and 1.65 million years ago. And compared to us, they were tiny. Some estimates suggest they averaged under 4 feet tall or around 1.2 meters, and may have weighed only around 60% of what modern humans do. They were not heavily built either, meaning they lacked the kind of skeletal robustness that could have at least compensated for their small size. So imagine the situation already. You are small. You are not especially strong. You do not have advanced weapons. You are living in predator country, and the things hunting you are not coyotes. But it gets worse. Homo habilis seems to have retained a number of ape-like traits and was at least partly arboreal, meaning it likely spent a decent amount of time in trees. That sounds useful, and sometimes it was. Trees could provide escape, rest, maybe even temporary safety, but trees are not magic. They don't feed you forever, and if you're not perfectly adapted for life in them, they come with risks of their own, especially falls. The same basic ability that may have helped Homo habilis survive could also injure them in a world where even a bad leg meant death. This was not an apex predator. This was a small, nervous, hungry primate trying to not become lunch. Now you might think being partly arboreal gave them a big survival advantage, and sometimes, yes, it probably did. But here's the problem. Homo habilis did not live on leaves. It did not have the luxury of staying high in the trees all day. Their diet appears to have included a significant amount of meat, and that single fact may have dragged them into danger over and over again. The source material suggests they showed one of the higher levels of meat eating seen in humans, with jaws and teeth adapted to ripping and processing tough food. That sounds like a power-up. It wasn't, because the way they got that meat was likely not by fearlessly hunting giant animals with expert coordination and sharpened spears. Their technology was still very simple. Stone tools, yes, but basic ones, and at least one group of paleontologists argued that at best they may only have been able to reliably defend carcasses from relatively smaller competitors like jackals or cheetahs. That is not the resume of a dominant hunter. That is the resume of a very desperate scavenger. And scavenging is one of the most dangerous jobs in nature, because the second you walk toward a carcass, you are betting that the animal which killed it is gone and not coming back. You are also betting that no one else smelled it first. That means every mouthful of meat could place Homo habilis face to face with creatures that were bigger, faster, stronger, more heavily armed, and much more experienced at violence, and ancient Africa had no shortage of those. According to the transcript, when researchers looked at the time and general region in which Homo habilis lived, they identified over 30 potential predators. Think about that for a second. Not one main threat. Not two. Over 30. That means even if you learned how to avoid one killer, there were still dozens of others using completely different methods to end you. Large cats seem to have been especially bad news. One of them was Meganterion, a jaguar-sized saber-toothed cat that, despite its overall size, was heavily built and carried terrifying forelimbs and enlarged canines. In the source transcript, one particularly gruesome interpretation suggests a human specimen may have been bitten from the front in a way that implies the cat could have almost enclosed the entire head in its jaws. Whether every attack looked like that or not, the point is clear. This was not a predator you survived by being kind of careful. Then there were other cats in the neighborhood. Dinophilis, Homotherium, and even larger felids that may have targeted young or vulnerable individuals. One of the cats mentioned in the source material may have reached around 405 kilograms, putting it in a terrifying size bracket for anything remotely human-shaped, and climbing a tree was not always the answer, because some of these predators likely relied on explosive ambush rather than long chases. This is the part many people miss about early human survival. It wasn't just about being hunted. It was about being hunted by an entire rotating cast of specialists. One cat may stalk you from cover, another may rush with brute force, another may go for the throat, another may target juveniles, another may simply be too large for you to do anything about. And remember, you are under 4 feet tall. You are not a terrifying prehistoric warrior. You are prey with hands. But if the big cats sound like a nightmare, hyenas may have been the part where the nightmare got personal. The source transcript describes multiple hyena threats, including extremely large and bone-crushing forms, alongside more agile, dog-like, running hyenas. One of them is framed as lion-sized and equipped with a bite powerful enough to crack bone with terrifying efficiency. That matters for a lot of reasons, but one especially bad one is this. If Homo habilis was scavenging for marrow, then they were competing with an animal that may have been even better at getting to the good part. So now picture the scene. A small group of early humans finally reaches a carcass. Maybe it took hours to find. Maybe they are starving. Maybe this is the one chance that day to get dense calories. And then hyenas arrive. Not slow, clumsy hyenas. Fast ones, pack-hunting ones, hyper-carnivorous ones. Animals built to run things down and tear into meat because meat was most of their business model. And unlike the fantasy version of human evolution, there is no dramatic soundtrack where the little hominins stand shoulder to shoulder and scare off the monsters with grit and determination. Sometimes the monsters just win. The source even emphasizes that Homo habilis was not a very good runner. At best, maybe they had some endurance, but endurance only matters if there is somewhere to go. If you spot danger early enough, and if the thing chasing you isn't already specialized for speed. That is the theme of this whole era. Every strategy they had was real, but every strategy they had was incomplete. Climb? Some predators can still get you. Run? Not well enough. Scavenge? Everyone stronger wants the same food. Stay in the trees? Then starve. Go to the water? Congratulations, now the crocodiles get a turn. If there is one place you would think an early human might find relief, it would be the water's edge. Fish, fresh water, mud, trackways, maybe some breathing room. Instead, it may have been one of the deadliest places they could possibly go. The source transcript points to giant crocodiles living alongside Homo habilis, including Crocodilus anthropophagus, a name that literally translates to human eater. And unlike some prehistoric monsters that merely sound scary, this one appears to have direct evidence behind the reputation. In one formation, 2 juvenile habilis individuals were found with leg and foot damage matching this crocodile's teeth. The implication is horrifyingly familiar. Ambush from the water, clamp onto the limbs, then drowning or a death roll that can rip limbs apart. And this crocodile was not small. The transcript gives adult estimates around 7.5 meters long and roughly 1.5 tons, meaning it was larger than a modern saltwater crocodile in both length and mass. So imagine being a young Homo habilis trying to catch fish with your hands. No spear, no metal hook, no boat, no proper distance between you and the water, just you, the shoreline, and a reptile whose entire body is built around explosive violence. There is also mention of another even larger crocodile, Crocodilus thorbjarnarssoni, which may have reached about 8 meters. And the OH7 holotype of Homo habilis may even preserve evidence of a giant croc attack on the leg and foot, with possible marks from a mammalian carnivore on the skull as well. Whether that individual was attacked before or after death is debated, but the message is still savage. Even the type specimen for the species may tell a story of mutilation. This is what I mean when I say early humans had no chance. The land wanted them dead. The water wanted them dead. And any attempt to get calories from either side came with terrible odds. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, so the big predators were the problem, not just them. The source material also points to snakes as a likely long-term danger. There may not be direct fossil evidence for every bite or constriction event, but the broader relationship between primates and snakes is ancient, ugly, and possibly important enough to have shaped our very perception. Some scientists have even proposed that primates became unusually good at visually detecting snakes because snakes were such a persistent threat, which means for Homo habilis, even the ground itself could be a problem. One careless step in grass, one hand in the wrong place, one hidden coil near water or roots. Game over. And then there are the animals that were not predators at all. Ancient Africa also had large territorial herbivores and omnivores, rhinos, hippo-like animals, giant pigs, giraffes, birds, and more. They may not have hunted early humans the way cats or crocodiles did, but they still turned the landscape into a place where one mistake could be fatal. A defensive charge from a large herbivore does not care whether you're technically on the food chain or not. This matters because survival is not just about avoiding what wants to eat you. It is about surviving every bad interaction. A broken arm, a damaged ankle, a crushed foot, a deep puncture wound, an infected bite, a fall from a tree. In a modern city, these are emergencies. In the world of Homo habilis, they are often endings. And just when it seems like the situation could not possibly get more unfair, their own diet may have been wrecking them from the inside out. The transcript reports severe dental wear in many Homo habilis individuals. Out of 26 studied specimens, only about 40% had decent teeth, while the rest showed major enamel wear, chipping, cracking, and overall heavy damage. Even more shocking, some of the affected individuals were under 10 years old, and one 17-year-old reportedly had dental damage worse than what you might expect from a modern, elderly person with poor hygiene. Think about what that says. These were not old survivors slowly being worn down by time. These was young individuals already carrying the kind of damage that, in a harsh environment, can push you toward malnutrition, infection, or simple inability to process the little food you manage to find. And the likely causes make perfect sense for a desperate scavenger. Tough plant material, bone, fibrous meat, whatever was left over, whatever stronger animals didn't take first. This is one of the bleakest parts of the story. They were not just struggling to get food. They were struggling to get food that wouldn't destroy them. And when the average lifespan may already have hovered around 12 years or less, you don't need decades of damage for the consequences to matter. You only need the damage to arrive before your next crisis. For Homo habilis, every bite was a gamble. Could it feed you? Could it crack a tooth? Could it draw you into predator territory? Could it all end in a fight over something half-rotten in the dirt? Very possibly. As if predators, injury, and terrible food weren't enough, the broader environment may also have been working against them. The transcript describes periods of intense climatic fluctuation in Africa, with cooling and increasing aridity contributing to food scarcity and even systematic starvation. As conditions worsened, populations may have been pushed to rely even more heavily on scavenged meat to make up their calories, which then created even more contact with predators and competitors doing the exact same thing. That is the ancient survival trap. When times get hard, everyone concentrates around the same resources. The thirsty go to water, the hungry go to carcasses, the weak go to cover, the predators go to all three, and Homo habilis was not alone out there. The source indicates that they shared parts of their world with other hominins, including Homo erectus, Homo rudolfensis, and Paranthropus boisei. At least some of those interactions may have ended violently. And if Homo habilis really was the smallest and among the least ground-adapted of the bunch, then they may often have been at a disadvantage when conflict happened away from the trees. On top of that, the transcript suggests Homo habilis had a relatively small brain size compared with some contemporaries, while species like Homo erectus may have enjoyed major technological advantages, including more advanced tools and possibly controlled fire. Whether every encounter turned into violence or not, the comparison is sobering. They were trying to survive against nature, while history was also starting to outgrow them. And yet somehow, despite all of this, Homo habilis did survive for a long stretch of time. How? Probably through a combination of just enough advantages. The source transcript suggests their simple tools still mattered. Even basic stone technology could help access marrow and tough plant material. There is also mention of a possible windbreak or rough hut around 1.7 million years old, which, if associated correctly, would imply at least some attempt to buffer against climate stress. And perhaps most importantly, they may have lived in groups that reached up to 85 individuals, which would drastically improve vigilance, defense, and the odds that any one individual, not you, gets picked off. That may sound cold, but that is how survival often works in nature, not by becoming invincible, but by becoming slightly harder to eliminate. Maybe one person spots the cat, maybe another scares off a smaller scavenger. Maybe the group reaches the carcass before the hyenas, maybe the tree is climbed in time, maybe the flood doesn't come tonight, maybe the crocodile lunges half a second too late, maybe that was enough. Because for a species like Homo habilis, survival was probably not about winning, it was about not losing today. So why did early humans have absolutely no chance? Because they were small in a world that rewarded size? Because they were lightly built in a world of crushing jaws and claws? Because they needed meat, but meat pulled them straight into danger? Because the rivers had crocodiles, the plains had cats, the carcasses had hyenas, the grass had snakes, the climate had no mercy, and even other humans may have been part of the problem, and yet they still made it. Not comfortably, not gloriously, but long enough. Which means every one of us is descended from lineages that survived one of the most brutally unfair chapters in human history. A chapter where being human did not make you special. It made you vulnerable. And maybe that's the strangest part of all. The human story did not begin with domination. It began with fear, hunger, luck, and just enough intelligence to keep dying a little slower than everything around us expected. If you enjoyed this video, subscribe for more stories from the most violent, bizarre, and unforgiving eras in the history of life. Because trust me, we have only just begun.